people out there? My name is Terry Amoeba. I work at arcade.dev, enterprise runtime for AI agents. So if you want to know who the user is, who the agent is, what resources they have access to, what scopes they have on that resource, and what action they actually took on those resources, check out arcade.dev. But today I want to dive into OAuth. So you may or may not remember if you were here last time, the next step that we have to do in our Master Arcade agent is sitting down and writing down some BDD so that we define exactly how the app will work. We'll get to that on Monday. Today I had a request come in for someone asking, hey, what the heck is OAuth? Um, and I think it's actually a really good question. Like, what is OAuth? Um, so there is a video by a gentleman called Nate Barbettini, I believe his name is. Um, Works at Arcade. And he had one of the best videos that I've ever seen on OAuth. So I am about to pull that video up. Okay, so boom, go ahead and post that joint, and then let me share my screen, and then we're just gonna watch the video. I'm gonna be taking some notes as we watch. The video is about an hour long, I want to say. So I might at some point speed up the talking or whatever, but I actually really just kind of want this to be a chill note taking session where I watch this video. So I had a few notes here already, right? Work at Arcade, OAuth comes up constantly. But when someone asks me what the heck is OAuth, I don't think they're asking for the RFC definition, right? Like if you ask Claude what OAuth is, the answer is going to be pretty rough. I'm looking for just that plain English answer of like, hey, what's happening inside one app that has permission? So I'm gonna watch Nate's video, take some notes. Got a little template already up here, and let's dive in. Okay, sorry, I was just getting everything set up. Sorry, I was just getting everything set up. So let's rewind because I actually missed my good man Nate's intro. All right. Okay, so I think it's definitely worth just going back and pausing here. So, in theory, this is the simplest kind of login that you can have. When people talk about how they're rolling their own auth, often this is basically what they're doing, right? They could just be running it on Airtable. You have a form where that form is going to have a username and a password. Then, hopefully, like Nate said, you are hashing the password, so you're not just storing it in plain text, but what is it? Buyer beware there. Um, and then basically you put in your username, you put in your password, we check the database to see if it's an exact match, and then once we verify it, we can actually look up your user info. So that might be like, hey, what's your, profile picture? And then we can look up your auth info. So, hey, are you allowed to send an email? Or are you allowed to delete an email or something, right? So this is the simplest kind of authentication that you can have on a website where you can sign up and say, this is my account, right? It's just basically a spreadsheet that lives somewhere that says, here's the person's username, here's their password. And then when you go on the website and you submit the form, we're just going to check, do the passwords match for the username? If they do, look up user info, then look up auth info. If they don't, wrong password, try again. And the cookie that we drop into your browser session is what allows us to know that you are the person that's logged in, right? And then we can put the max age on the cookie. So that's why sometimes when you log into a website, you have to log back out, or especially with work products, you find that you often have to log in and log out. That's why that happens. I doubt Nate's ever written bad code, knowing the guy. This is something I like to call dev speak, and it's why if you ever see me like presenting or doing stuff online, I'm often going to try to come at it from the perspective of the average person, right? And what's the average person doing when they're using most software on the internet today? They're going to their AI coding editor, they're giving it that software, and they're saying, here is what I want to do. So when you see me create content or go through, hey, how do you do XYZ? Yeah, I'm probably not going to show you a handwritten Python script that I cooked up that has every single little bell and whistle because most people aren't at that level, right? And I think this is something that Auth really suffers from. Not only is there like kind of like an ego thing, where the off people, because of the way that security works, where it's one of those critical pieces of the business that is not allowed to fail. In terms of, for a lot of companies, if you don't have security, you have nothing, right? So the security team needs to be really knowledgeable. It can't be vibe coded, for example, right? You actually know how does all these processes work under the hood. And then when they go out and try to explain it to other people, they just kind of assume that everyone else has that knowledge, which is just simply not the case. So a lot of the friction is really just like getting the dev speak out of there and explaining, like, this whole simple login, right? When Nate explains it, and I say, "Hey, you have a Google Sheet somewhere that has usernames and passwords," and then when I type in my username and password on the site, it's just a form that checks against the Google Sheet. Everyone can get that. Everyone can also understand why that would be a huge pain to maintain, right? What happens when they update their password? Blah, 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 blah. How do you force? Like, there's tons of different things that. How do you keep your sheet secure, etc. So I think anytime we can get towards plain English instead of using these words that you only would know if you're like diving deep into the OAuth world, don't love. So, well, I'll let him finish. Oh. It's like actually hilarious that he recorded this video 8 years ago because sometimes when I'm dealing with the AI kind of newsverse, this is what I feel often, right? So I work with MCP every day. I'm talking with people who are trying to build MCP every day. And then I'll go on Twitter sometimes and I'll see people saying stuff like MCP's dead, you don't need MCP, whatever. And I literally have to ask myself, like, huh, are we in the same world? And the answer is no, because the people that I'm talking to are not the people that the people posting on Twitter are talking to, right? There's a pretty big disconnect between like what are enterprise companies trying to do with AI agents and what is someone who's at the cutting edge on Twitter trying to do with AI agent. So I think just making sure that you A know what's going on and B like realize what's your use case and how do you fit into all of this is pretty important, right? That's why there's 3 blogs, because each one of those blogs is going to make a different point or a different use case, right? I would kind of compare it to using like different models. There's things that OpenAI models are better at. There's things that Anthropic models are better at, right? There's things that maybe they're not better at, but there's things that it makes more sense to route to the open source models, etc. Let's go. And I'm going to pause there because I think what he just said about the identity thing is really important. So for the rest of this video, and also I think for most of my content, um, I'm going to do um, identity to cover that login, authz, authorization, etc. Right? We're just going to call that identity. So, in terms of pre 2010 for identity, simple login forms, that's the first one we just talked about, right? That form that gives you a cookie. And then let's see what else he says. More obscure. I just got a note on my layout, so let me just go ahead and change this. My apologies. And let's get back into the video. All right, I'm gonna let Nate finish, but just wanted to say shout out to Nate for 8 years ago was already thinking about delegated authorization, right? This is by far the hottest topic in AI today, and he's been thinking about it for a long, long time. So let's let's listen to what he has to say, and specifically keep in mind this video is 8 years old, right? So this is all very much free agents, which I think is very, very cool. Oh, oh, I mean, no offense to Yelp. I'm sure they were doing their best, but what is this UI, people? Jeez Louise. So, okay, you would first you say, okay, are your friends already on Yelp? Many of your friends may already be here. Now you can find out. Just log in and we'll display all your contacts. So this is like when you install WhatsApp or whatever it wants to get your contacts. So you would first pick your email service between MSN, Yahoo, AOL, and Gmail. Actually, pretty funny that Gmail is the only one who is still here today, but it was last here. You put in your email address and then you would literally put in your Gmail password. So Nate's going to tell us why this wasn't ideal. Yep. Just in case. Yeah. Just in case there is something. Oh. So that's one thing for sure. I think I'm gonna do like a further research section. And one question I have is, has the oops, finance industry changed? Because Nate mentions that um, Betterment was one of those apps where you did have to just give your banking info because the banking companies were very against OAuth. But I know now there's services like Plaid, or I guess Plaid, I don't know. Um, there's a Stripe Link thing. There's a few different services, and I wonder if they have kind of evolved on this or if they're still just stuck in the old ways. Right. Missed that. So I'm gonna take some notes here, but um, I think there's an interesting distinction here where in this little diagram, it's I trust Gmail and I kind of trust Yelp, right? So there's this kind of assumption that you trust Gmail. Now you want to connect your Gmail to a service that maybe you don't 100% trust, but you kind of trust, right? And you only want to give it access to your contacts. Yep. I just want to do a quick sidebar and say shout out to the devs out there that came up with stuff like this because we take so much for granted that when I log into my account on Twitter, it's always going to be my account and that you can't access that data unless you literally hack me. And the fact that we can just take that for granted and know that it works and it works well enough that when it doesn't work, it's a huge problem. Really cool. Shout out to Specs and shout out to the devs. Sorry, I got distracted. I'm gonna go back. Okay, this is a really good screenshot here. Okay, so I'm gonna grab a screenshot here because I think this is, quite frankly, the meat and potatoes of. Let me get the subtitles off so that it's a clean screenshot. Uh, there we go. Okay, so let's see if we understand this. I go to Yelp.com. My name is Terry Demiba. On Yelp.com, there is a connect with Google button. Why does Yelp want me to connect with Google? Because Yelp wants me to be able to connect my contacts that I already have with Yelp so that if my friends are on Yelp, I can also see what kind of reviews that they've left. When I click on connect with Google, it's going to send me to an authorization server. That authorization server is going to tell me, hey, log into accounts.google.com. When the user actually logs in, you're then going to get that callback with a response type code. When, oh, I missed a step there. Okay, so you're then going to actually have to consent explicitly that Yelp is allowed to access your public profile and contacts. That's going to take you back to the redirect URI with the authorization code. Now that you have the authorization code, we're going to hit accounts.google.com again and get an access token. And that access token is going to allow us, presumably, to read from contacts.google.com. We are then going to go back to yelp.com/callback, hit that resource server with our access token, which is contacts.google.com. And just like that, we are able to read your contacts on Google with Yelp without Yelp having any of your credentials, right? That's the important part here, is that the only place where you put your info was accounts.google.com, who already had your username and password. But Yelp.com doesn't get that info. That's important for a few reasons, but the biggest is just you don't want to give anyone access to your Gmail or to any of your accounts, right? And it's not that we don't trust that Yelp is secure, but there could be a breach, there could be a hack, whatever. You just don't want to have your data out there in that way. So I think that's a pretty powerful part. So I wanted to pause there. Let's, Yep. Bruh, it's almost like Nate saw agents coming because this is literally what I explain to people all day. Like, you don't want to use service accounts, and you don't want to use like a agent identity, right? You want to do that delegated auth, and he was already thinking about it. It's pretty cool. Scope and consent. Okay. I like that. I like the way Nate's explaining this because I like the way Nate's explaining this because he's like, "Ah, man, this is so cool. And I should probably redo this video for 2026, but this is really cool because he showed us what the flow looked like just vanilla with words. Then he showed us with just that response type code. Now he's adding in the scope of profile and context, and let's see what changes. Ooh, ooh. That's pretty actually. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so about 34 minutes in, and there's about 44 minutes left. I think I'm going to leave this one for tomorrow, but I do want to do a recap of everything that we've seen today and just kind of think about what I saw in that video. So, Nate first opens up the talk by saying, hey, what is the simplest login that we can think of? And it's this simple login where it lives on your website. There's a form of authentication. User enters their info, check against some kind of database, hopefully with hashing. Then you drop a cookie into the web browser session that ties to a session ID. Problem with this is you are on the hook for all security and maintenance. That's going to be stressful, labor intensive, and most importantly, boring. So, what the heck is OAuth? Part of the problem with people not knowing what OAuth is there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of dev speak, and there's a lot of bad or incorrect advice out there or conflicting advice. And then there seems to be this kind of spec looseness where when people talk about something like HTTP, there's one way to do it, but when we talk about OAuth, there's 17. So then Nate takes us down memory lane, right? Let's go back 20 years in 2006 when there's no smartphones. There was still that simple login. There was SSO. But now we have to start thinking about mobile. So how do we handle identity on devices, right? How do we have cookies persist on devices, etc.? And then delegated authorization, which is crazy because, like I've said many times, this video is 8 years old. No one was building agents 8 years ago. But this question of authentication was already delegated authentication authorization was already like popping up, right? The question was, how can I let a site access my data without having to give it my password, right? Because in the original iteration of Yelp, you would literally just type in your Gmail email and your Gmail password on Yelp, and Yelp would store that somewhere, right? That sounds like an absolute nightmare. So the next iteration was, okay, what if we use this OAuth 2.0 with delegated authentication? And then I think now is a good time to bring back up that diagram and see if we can explain it from scratch. So, well, that wasn't the full diagram. 1 second, let me find the full one. Okay, so young Thierry Damiba goes to Yelp.com. I want to connect to Yelp.com, or sorry, I want to connect Yelp.com with my contacts and my profile on Google. So Yelp will get access to, for example, my profile photo, my name, and they'll also read access to my contacts. Go to Yelp.com. There's a button that says Connect with Google. When I click Connect with Google, it's going to send me to the authorization server, but with a redirect URI, a response type, as well as a scope. I log into accounts.google.com with my natural credentials. From there, google.com is going to look at the scope that I requested in my request from Yelp.com, and it's going to create a consent page. So since I'm asking for a profile and contacts, it's going to say, hey, do you want to let Yelp access your profile and contacts? I click yes. We then go back to the redirect URI, which is yelp.com/callback, and then there's going to be something in that string that has our authorization code. Now that we have an authorization code, we go back to accounts.google.com to get an access token. And this is when the back channel stuff starts, right? We've done everything so far in the front channel, which means the browser. We can have it in JavaScript or HTML. Now we're moving to, hey, I want this on the server-side code. So I know exactly what's happening. So after I hit accounts.google.com, I then have that access token, and then I go hit the resource server with that access token, which in this case is contacts.google.com. I get the contacts. Everyone's happy. Yelp has no idea what my Gmail password is. And the only way for this process someone to have intercepted the access token before I hit the resource server would literally to be inside of Google servers. So that's pretty secure, eh? Awesome. So that was Nate B's OAuth 2.0 video. Gonna come back tomorrow, watch the other half, And then, like I mentioned on Monday, we're going to get back to the Master Arcade project. So this is TDAI, touchdown with AI, baby. I am a member of GTM staff at arcade.dev. We are the enterprise AI runtime. So if you're interested in who is the agent, who is the user, what resources do they have access to, what scopes do they have on those resources, and what actions did they actually take on those resources, right? You want to have an agent that the CEO can hit and an intern can hit, but obviously you're going to have different scopes for both of those people. Then that's where Arcade really shines. So want to say shout out to y'all for popping out to the stream. Ooh, I hope I wasn't cut off this entire time. I should have looked better at my video.